I dropped my towel after my shower to give my neighbors a show. My husband was furious. Hi, Reddit. My name is Lauren. I'm 31 years old, and I've been married to my husband, Eric, for 8 years. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said that we had a good marriage, steady, predictable, safe. But now, as I sit here writing this, I realize how little I appreciated what we had until I threw it all away. I made a series of selfish, reckless choices that didn't just hurt Eric. They completely destroyed our marriage, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I've done. Eric and I met when we were in our early 20s. He was the kind of man who always had a plan, someone who made me feel grounded and safe in ways I'd never experienced before. While my life felt chaotic and uncertain, Eric was steady, a rock I could depend on. He had big dreams, and I admired that about him. Over time, his ambition became one of the things I loved most about him. We got married young, and for a long time, it felt like we were building something strong together. Eric worked hard, always putting in extra hours at his job to make sure we were financially secure. He wanted to give me the life he thought I deserved, a nice home, vacations, stability. But somewhere along the way, I think we lost sight of each other. His dedication to his career became all-consuming, and I started to feel like an afterthought in my own marriage. The past few years have been especially hard. Eric's work schedule became more demanding, with late nights and weekends spent at the office. He was always tired, always stressed, and when he came home, it felt like he barely had the energy to acknowledge me, let alone connect with me. I tried to talk to him about it a few times, but he'd brush it off, saying things would get better once this project was finished or that deadline was met. But those projects and deadlines kept coming, and I started to feel invisible. I know I should have been more patient, more understanding. Eric was doing all of this for us, for our future. But at the time, all I could see was how lonely I felt, how neglected I was. I started to resent him for the very things that once made me love him, and instead of trying harder to communicate, I let those feelings fester. I started to pull away, convincing myself that I deserved more, that I deserved to feel wanted and appreciated, and that's when I made the worst mistakes of my life. I don't know how to explain why I did what I did. Maybe it was selfishness or boredom or some twisted need for validation. Maybe it was all of those things. But the truth is, I let my insecurities and frustrations lead me down a path I never thought I'd take. I started seeking attention elsewhere, looking for the validation I felt I wasn't getting at home. At first, it was harmless, little moments of flirtation that made me feel alive again. But it didn't stay harmless for long. I can't even blame Eric for what happened. He wasn't perfect, but he was a good man, a man who loved me and trusted me, and I betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. I let my selfishness ruin everything we had, and now I'm sitting here in the wreckage, wondering if there's any way to fix it. But deep down, I know I've probably lost him for good. Looking back, I can see all the little moments where I could have made a different choice. I could have been honest with Eric about how I was feeling. I could have fought for our marriage instead of giving up on it. But I didn't. I took the easy way out, chasing attention and excitement instead of dealing with the real issues. And now I'm paying the price. Chris was the first to catch my attention, though I didn't realize how far things would go at the time. He and his wife, Danielle, moved in across the street about a year ago. At first, they seemed like the perfect couple, always smiling, laughing together as they worked in their yard or walked their dog. I barely noticed him at first. We exchanged polite waves when passing by, but that was the extent of it. It wasn't until Danielle went out of town for a work trip that things began to change. Chris suddenly seemed more present, always finding reasons to linger outside when I was in the yard. One day, when I was weeding the garden, he came over, offering to lend me a pair of gloves. I tried to politely decline, but he insisted, saying he had extras. That was the first time we had a real conversation. He was charming in a way I hadn't felt in years, confident, complimentary, and easy to talk to. It made me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing him more. He waved more enthusiastically when I was outside, found excuses to come over, and always had a kind word or a compliment ready. He'd comment on how well I kept up the garden, or mention how impressed he was by my attention to detail around the house. I knew it was just friendly banter, but it felt nice to have someone notice me. Things escalated when he caught me taking out the trash one afternoon. He struck up a conversation about a project he was working on in his garage and asked if I wanted to see it. I hesitated, but I went, telling myself it was harmless curiosity. His garage was cluttered, and as we searched for the tools he was talking about, our hands brushed. I froze for a moment, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he smiled in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. After that, I started finding myself in his garage more often, under the pretense of borrowing tools or checking out some project he was working on. At first, it was just conversation, laughing, sharing stories, and enjoying the easy companionship. But as the days went by, the interactions grew more personal, the touches more intentional. I told myself it was harmless, that nothing physical had happened, so it wasn't really cheating. But deep down, I knew better. I craved the attention he gave me, the way he made me feel wanted, even though I knew it was wrong. Mark, the neighbor behind us, had been living there for years, long before Chris moved in. He was quiet, the kind of person you didn't notice unless you were looking for him. He kept to himself most of the time, spending hours in his backyard, tending to his garden, or sitting on his patio with a book. His house backed directly onto ours, and from his yard, he had a clear view into our windows. I started noticing Mark more when Eric's work hours got longer. I'd be standing in the kitchen or folding laundry, and I'd glance outside to see him there, always watching. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but it kept happening. Whenever I looked out, his eyes would meet mine, holding the gaze for just a little too long. Instead of feeling uncomfortable, I felt noticed. And after so long of feeling invisible, that small attention felt intoxicating. One evening I stepped outside for some fresh air after putting the kids to bed. Mark was in his yard, leaning on the fence, and he struck up a conversation. We talked about nothing in particular, his garden, the weather, his quiet life living alone. There was something calming about his presence, something that made me feel at ease. As the weeks went by, these late-night conversations became a routine. I'd step outside, and he'd already be there waiting like he knew I'd come. Over time, our conversations grew deeper. He listened in a way that made me feel understood, asking questions that made me open up more than I should have. I found myself telling him about the loneliness I felt at home, the distance between me and Eric. He didn't offer advice or solutions. He just listened, and that was enough. It felt like we were sharing something intimate, even though nothing physical had happened. But that changed one night when he invited me over for a drink. I hesitated, but the pull of his attention was too strong to resist. His house was quiet, cozy, and as we sat on his couch talking, the space between us seemed to disappear. When he leaned in and kissed me, I didn't stop him. It felt inevitable, like all our quiet moments had been leading to this. From then on, my interactions with Mark were no longer just conversations over the fence. We found reasons to meet under the cover of darkness, stealing moments in his backyard or in his house when no one could see. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just a way to fill the void Eric had left. But as I juggled my secret moments with Mark and Chris, I knew I was playing a dangerous game. I just didn't realize how close I was to losing everything. After those initial encounters with Chris and Mark, things spiraled faster than I ever could have imagined. I don't know how to say this without sounding ridiculous, but I think it all started because I was ovulating. I've read about how hormones can mess with your emotions and drive, but I never thought it would lead me to do something like this. That week, everything felt heightened, the desire, the need to feel wanted, the craving for excitement. It was like a switch flipped in me, and I couldn't stop myself. After what happened with Chris in his garage and Mark in his house, I told myself it would stop. I swore to myself that it was just a moment of weakness, that I'd never let it happen again. But the truth is, the thrill of it all, the attention, the way they made me feel alive, became something I couldn't resist. I started justifying it in my head, telling myself that it was only physical, that it didn't mean anything. I convinced myself that as long as Eric didn't know, it wasn't really hurting anyone. Since then, I've been sleeping with one of them almost every week. With Chris, It's usually in his garage or his car when Danielle isn't home. With Mark, it's always late at night in his backyard or his house under the cover of darkness. They both know about my life, my marriage, but neither of them seems to care. If anything, they seem to relish the secrecy, the fact that they're sharing me without Eric ever suspecting a thing. I hate myself for it, for letting things go this far. I know what I'm doing is wrong, unforgivably wrong, but I can't seem to stop. It's like I'm trapped in this cycle of guilt and desire, and every time I tell myself it's the last time, I end up right back where I started. I don't even know who I am anymore. All I know is that I've crossed lines I can never uncross, and it's only a matter of time before everything falls apart. That afternoon, everything changed. I had just stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a towel when I wandered into the bedroom. The house was quiet, and I assumed I had time to get ready before Eric came home from work. As I moved to the window, I glanced outside and saw Chris standing in his front yard, raking leaves. He wasn't looking at the ground or the leaves, he was looking directly at our house, at me. The way his gaze lingered sent a rush of adrenaline through me. It was a feeling I'd become addicted to, the thrill of being noticed, of knowing someone was paying attention to me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I don't know what came over me, but I stood there, letting him watch. My towel was loosely draped around me, and without thinking, I let it slip slightly. When his gaze didn't waver, I let the towel fall to the floor entirely, standing there for just a moment longer than I should have. I felt powerful, desired. It was a fleeting moment of excitement, but it blinded me to the reality of what I was doing. I didn't notice the sound of the front door opening, didn't realize Eric had come home early until I turned and saw him standing in the doorway. The look on his face stopped me cold. It was a mix of shock, confusion, and betrayal, and I knew immediately that he had seen everything. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I scrambled to grab the towel, fumbling to cover myself as a wave of guilt washed over me. Eric's eyes darted between me and the window, and it was clear he had pieced everything together. His voice, when he finally spoke, was sharp and cold. He demanded to know what I was doing, but I had no answer. My mind raced, trying to come up with something to say, but there was nothing I could say to make it better. The truth hung in the air between us, undeniable. Without waiting for an explanation, Eric turned and stormed out of the room. I followed him, trying to stop him, but he ignored me. He grabbed his keys and headed straight for the front door. I realized, with growing horror, that he was going to confront Chris. I tried to plead with him to stop, but he wasn't listening. He walked across the street with purpose, his shoulders tense and his fists clenched. From the doorway, I watched as Eric knocked on Chris's front door. When Chris answered, the look of surprise on his face was clear even from where I stood. Eric didn't waste any time. I could tell by his body language that he was demanding answers, pressing Chris to admit what had been going on. Chris tried to deflect at first, clearly caught off guard, but it didn't take long for him to crack under the pressure. He admitted that he and I had been seeing each other, trying to explain it in a way that minimized what had happened. But then, in a moment of panic or desperation, Chris revealed something I wasn't prepared for. He told Eric that I had also been seeing Mark, the neighbor behind us. It was like he wanted to shift the blame, to make himself look less guilty by dragging someone else into it. From where I stood, I could see Eric's body stiffen at this new information. He didn't respond or argue. He just turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Chris standing there. When Eric came back inside, he didn't say a word to me. He told me there was nothing left to talk about, that I had made my choice, and now he was making his. And just like that, he was gone. The sound of the door closing behind him felt final, like the end of everything we had built together. I stood there in the empty house, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. I had destroyed my marriage, shattered Eric's trust, and now I was left alone to face the consequences of my choices. The thrill I had chased with Chris and Mark suddenly felt meaningless compared to the emptiness I felt in that moment. I had no one to blame but myself. I cannot even stop remembering how everything unfolded that afternoon. Can't stop regretting. How Eric came back inside the house with a calmness that terrified me. How he didn't yell, didn't ask any more questions, didn't even look at me. He walked straight past me and headed to the bedroom. How for a brief moment I thought maybe he was willing to talk, to hear me out. But when I followed him, I realized how wrong I was. Eric was standing by the closet, pulling out a duffel bag. His movements were deliberate, methodical, like he'd already made up his mind. I stood in the doorway, frozen, watching as he grabbed a handful of clothes and tossed them into the bag without care. The air was heavy, charged with tension, and the silence was deafening. "Eric," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper, "please, can we talk about this? Let me explain." He didn't respond. He didn't even glance in my direction. His face was cold, unreadable, and that hurt more than anything he could have said. When I tried to step closer, reaching out to touch his arm, he pulled away, his movements sharp and final. "Eric, please," I begged. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can go to therapy, or—" He cut me off with a shake of his head. "Don't," he said, his voice low but firm. "There's nothing to fix." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the tears streaming down my face, but I couldn't stop them. I tried to explain, to apologize, to tell him how sorry I was, but every word felt hollow, inadequate. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear anything from me. Eric zipped up the bag and slung it over his shoulder, turning to leave without another word. I blocked his path, desperate to stop him, to make him stay. "Please don't go," I said, my voice breaking. "We've been through so much. Don't let this be the end." He looked at me then, and the pain in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "You already ended it," he said quietly. "I just didn't realize it until now." With that, he stepped around me and walked out of the room. I followed him to the door, still pleading, still hoping there was some way to salvage what I had broken. But he didn't look back. He opened the door, walked out, and closed it behind him, leaving me standing there in silence. I remember wandering aimlessly from room to room, my mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of Eric, his jacket hanging by the door, his shoes neatly lined up by the closet, the coffee mug he always used still sitting on the counter. Each one felt like a stab to the heart, a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I sat on the edge of the bed that day, staring at the spot where his clothes had been moments ago, and the weight of my actions finally hit me. I had destroyed everything. Eric had been my partner, my rock, the person who had stood by me through everything, and I had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and not just with one person, but two. The double betrayal was too much for him to bear, and I couldn't blame him. I felt the shame wash over me, suffocating and inescapable. How had I let it get to this point? How had I been so selfish, so blind to the damage I was causing? I thought about all the moments I could have stopped, all the chances I had to make a different choice, and I hated myself for not taking them. The house felt cold, empty, and unfamiliar without Eric in it. I can't stop thinking about the look on his face when he left, the pain, the anger, the finality of it. He hadn't yelled or screamed or thrown things. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. He was done. Our marriage was over, and it was my fault. I can't remember how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts. The hours blurred together, and the ache in my chest grew heavier with every passing moment. I had ruined everything, and there was no going back. Eric was gone, and I was alone, left to face the consequences of my actions and the life I had shattered with my own hands. I just want to know if there is actually any way I can redeem myself. Please help me. Any advice will go a long way. What do I do at this point? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been a few weeks since Eric left, and the silence in the house is unbearable. Every sound feels amplified, footsteps echoing in empty rooms, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards. It's a silence that reminds me every second of what I've lost. He's gone, and I have no one to blame but myself. Eric hasn't responded to a single call or text. At first, I called him constantly, desperate to talk, to explain, to apologize. I left voicemail after voicemail, pouring my heart out, begging him to at least hear me out. But each one went unanswered. The texts I sent sat there, unread. Eventually, I stopped trying. His silence said everything. It was over. The house feels empty without him. His presence was always so subtle, so quiet, But now that it's gone, the absence feels deafening. His shoes are no longer by the door. The coffee mug he used every morning isn't on the counter. Even the faint smell of his cologne that used to linger in the bedroom is gone. It's like he erased himself from this place, from my life. And now all I'm left with are memories and the suffocating guilt of what I did to him. I can't even look at myself in the mirror. Every time I catch my reflection, all I see is the woman who destroyed the one good thing in her life. I keep replaying that day in my head, the way Eric looked at me when he found out, the way he walked out without a single glance back. I can't stop thinking about how much I hurt him, how much I broke the trust he had in me. It's a weight I carry every second of every day. And then there's Chris and Mark. Since Eric left, both of them have reached out to me. Chris was the first, sending a casual text a few days later as if nothing had happened. He said something about wanting to check in on me, but I knew what he was doing. A few days after that, he showed up at the house, standing on the front porch with his usual confident smirk, asking if I wanted to talk. I didn't let him in. I couldn't. Just seeing him standing there made my stomach churn. I closed the door without a word, and he walked away. But the guilt lingered long after he was gone. Mark has been less direct, but just as persistent. Late at night, I still catch him outside in his yard, looking toward the house. He's sent a few texts, vague and nonchalant, but I know what he's trying to do. One night, he even knocked on the back door, asking if I wanted to come over for a drink. I told him no, but I could see the disappointment in his face as he turned and walked back to his house. Their attention used to make me feel alive, wanted, needed, but now it only makes me feel sick. Every time they reach out, it's a reminder of how far I've fallen, how much damage I've caused. I can't even look at them without feeling a wave of shame so intense it makes my chest ache. They're part of the reason I'm in this mess, but I know the blame lies with me. I'm the one who made the choices. I'm the one who betrayed Eric. I don't know what to do anymore. The house feels like a prison. Every room a reminder of the life I had and the future I threw away. I can't escape the guilt, the shame, the overwhelming sense of loss. I've lost Eric, the person who loved me unconditionally, who gave me stability and kindness when I needed it most. And for what? A fleeting thrill? A selfish need for validation? Sometimes I wonder if Eric will ever forgive me, if there's any way to repair the damage I've done. But deep down, I know I don't deserve his forgiveness. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. The emptiness inside me grows stronger every day, and I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to live with what I've done. All I know is that I'm alone, and it's all my fault. It wasn't Eric who told me he was consulting a divorce lawyer. He hadn't spoken to me directly since the day he left, and I had no reason to think that would change. I found out through a mutual friend, someone who probably didn't want to get involved but felt obligated to give me a heads up. Hearing the words divorce lawyer felt like a blow I wasn't prepared for, even though I knew it was coming. Somehow, I had convinced myself that there was still a chance that if I could just talk to Eric, he might hear me out. But now, the finality of what I'd done was starting to settle in. The friend was hesitant to say much, only mentioning that Eric had started looking into his options and was seriously considering filing for divorce. She didn't say much more, but she didn't have to. I felt the weight of it instantly. Divorce. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud, suffocating and unavoidable. I had broken something that couldn't be fixed, and Eric was taking the steps to make sure there was no going back. After the call, I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, trying to process what I'd just heard. Divorce. I'd never even allowed myself to think of the word before. No matter how bad things got between us, no matter how much I'd taken Eric for granted, I never thought it would come to this. But now it was real. He was moving on, taking the first steps to make our separation permanent. The realization hit me in waves. At first there was denial. I told myself it wasn't final yet, that Eric was just angry and hurt and needed time to cool off. But as the hours passed, denial gave way to panic. What if he wasn't just angry? What if he had already decided that there was no saving us? What if he was done for good? The thought of losing him forever, of watching him walk out of my life completely, was unbearable. But wasn't that what I deserved? I couldn't stop thinking about how we'd gotten to this point. The lies, the betrayals, the choices I made that led us here. I kept telling myself it wasn't all my fault, that the distance between us started long before Chris and Mark came into the picture. But deep down, I knew the truth. Eric didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to be hurt, humiliated, and betrayed by the one person he trusted the most. And now he was doing the only thing he could to protect himself, walking away. I thought about calling him, begging him to reconsider, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What could I even say? How could I ask for another chance when I'd given him every reason not to trust me? Every time I picked up my phone, I froze, staring at his name in my contacts, knowing he wouldn't answer. The silence between us felt like a chasm I couldn't cross. The worst part was knowing that this wasn't just about me and Eric. It was about the life we had built together, the dreams we once shared, the future we had planned. I thought about all the little things, our wedding day, the vacations we took, the nights we stayed up talking about the life we wanted to create. I thought about how hard Eric worked to give us that life, how much he sacrificed to make sure we were secure, and how I had thrown it all away. As the days passed, the reality of divorce began to sink in. I imagined what it would be like to live without Eric, to watch him move on while I stayed behind, haunted by my mistakes. I thought about the paperwork, the division of assets, the conversations we'd have to have about ending our marriage. But more than that, I thought about the emotional toll, the pain of knowing that I had destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. I started wondering if there was any way to fix this, any way to convince Eric to give me another chance. Could I prove to him that I was willing to change, to rebuild the trust I had broken? Or was it already too late? The more I thought about it, the more hopeless it felt. Eric wasn't the kind of person to make decisions lightly. If he was consulting a divorce lawyer, it meant he had already made up his mind. The guilt and shame were overwhelming, but so was the fear. I couldn't imagine my life without Eric in it. I couldn't imagine waking up every day knowing that I had lost him forever. But the truth was, I had no one to blame but myself. I made the choices that led us here, and now I had to live with the consequences. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. I can't undo what I've done. I can't take back the lies, the betrayals, or the pain I caused. All I can do now is hope that one day, Eric might find it in his heart to forgive me, even if we can't be together. But for now, I'm left with nothing but regret and the harsh reality that I may have destroyed my marriage for good. Update. Hello, Reddit. This may just be my last post here, so I have some new information. I found out some more things about Eric. I didn't find out about Eric's new life from him, of course not. We haven't spoken since the day he walked out, and every attempt I made to reach him was met with silence. I found out through social media, like some outsider looking in on his life, and it shattered me in ways I didn't think were possible. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through mutual friends' profiles. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, maybe just a sign that he was okay, that he wasn't as broken as I was. And then, there it was. A picture of Eric at a gathering, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. He was smiling, a genuine, carefree smile I hadn't seen in years, maybe longer. It stopped me cold. I stared at the screen, my heart racing, trying to process the image in front of me. As I dug deeper, I realized he'd moved to another city. A mutual friend mentioned it in a comment. He was renting an apartment close to his new job, a fresh start in every sense of the word. He'd left not just me, but the entire life we had built together. The thought of him packing up and moving on while I was still stuck in the wreckage of my mistakes felt like a dagger to the chest. There were more pictures, group photos at work events, casual dinners with colleagues, and even a hiking trip I hadn't known about. In every single one, Eric looked happy, relaxed, free. It was like the weight he carried during our marriage had lifted, and seeing him like that was unbearable. I wanted to be happy for him. I wanted to believe that he deserved this, that he deserved to move on and find joy after everything I'd put him through. But all I could feel was the crushing weight of my own loss, knowing I wasn't part of that happiness. What hurt the most were the rumors. In one photo, Eric was standing next to a woman, a beautiful, confident woman with a bright smile and an arm casually draped around his shoulder. The comments under the picture were filled with speculation, people teasing Eric about her and making jokes I couldn't bear to read. I don't know if they're involved, and honestly, it doesn't matter. The fact that he could be moving on, that he could find someone else to share his life with, was enough to tear me apart. And yet I know he deserves it. He deserves to be with someone who values him, someone who won't take him for granted the way I did. He deserves to smile like that, to feel free and happy and unburdened. I ruined what we had. I broke the trust, the foundation of our marriage, and now I have to live with the consequences. Seeing him happy without me is just part of the punishment I deserve. Sitting here now in the empty house that used to be our home, I can't stop thinking about how I let it come to this. My need for validation, my selfish choices, my complete disregard for the man who loved me, all of it led to this moment. I destroyed my marriage because I couldn't see the value of what I had. And now I'm left with nothing but regret. Eric was my partner, my rock, the person who stood by me through everything. He worked tirelessly to build a life for us, to give me stability and love, and I threw it all away for fleeting moments of attention and excitement. I let my insecurities and selfishness blind me to what truly mattered, and now I have to live with the knowledge that I ruined the best relationship I ever had. The silence in this house is suffocating. Everywhere I look, I see reminders of Eric, the chair where he used to sit and read, the spot on the counter where he always left his keys, the coffee mug he used every morning. It's like the walls themselves are mourning his absence, and I can't escape the guilt that follows me everywhere. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself. How do you forgive yourself for something like this? How do you move on when you've destroyed the person you loved most? Eric deserves to move on, to find happiness, but I'm not sure I'll ever be able to do the same. The weight of my mistakes feels unbearable, and I don't know how to rebuild my life from here. I know I can't change the past. I can't undo what I've done or take away the pain I caused. Reddit, I'm asking for advice. How do you forgive yourself for something like this? How do you pick up the pieces when you've destroyed the best thing you ever had? I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I know I need to find a way to live with myself. It probably wouldn't work. Your advice, that is. There's probably no way I could move on after everything I've done to ruin my life. Because right now, I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to come up for air. And I guess you guys probably will learn a thing or two from my not-so-great life now. I sure hope you know it's a lot better on the other side than where I am right now. Goodbye, guys.